Calkins. My name is Catherine Calkins. I'm a member of the board of directors of Go Green Wilmette. And welcome to Go Green Wilmette's Alien Plants webinar featuring Matt Evans from the Chicago Botanic Garden and Ed Nesbitt and Nancy Pavkovich, who are volunteers dedicating their time and efforts to the restoration of ecosystems along the Canal Shores Golf Course. Our program tonight focuses on defining invasive plant species, learning to recognize some, and understanding why they are so damaging. Many of the green spaces around us in parks, forest preserves, and even in our yards are riddled with these plants. While they may look green and healthy, the plants are actually doing more harm than good at a time when we especially need to keep our ecosystems healthy. So first off, we have Matt Evans. And Matt, thank you for speaking tonight. And please start us off.
All right, thank you so much, Catherine, and welcome everybody. Tonight I'm going to share my screen now, and then I will be talking about invasive species on the landscape. I will be putting this in context for you guys. I've done this before, and the technical plant science botany side doesn't translate to what you guys can do. So I wanted to make sure to provide enough information about the plants and also critically the information about why it matters and what you can do. So I have named this portion of the presentation your habitat, and invasive species. So my name is Matt. I'm from the Botanic Garden. I work there managing the 100 acres of woodland. There are 100 acres of woodland that are about 90 of which is inaccessible to the public as a research woodland to understand better how to improve our ecosystems and bring them back to health, and about 12 acres of trails and accessible woodland to the public. So we're going to start this presentation with Aldo Leopold. And if you're not familiar with who Aldo Leopold is, he is one of the fathers of ecology. He practiced and lived in Wisconsin near Madison. His shack is still there today, and you can go and visit him. Well, his shack and where he was buried. His contribution to ecology was invaluable, and to humanity might be described the same way. He wrote the Sand County Almanac, which within it has an essay called The Land Ethic. I will not further go into the land ethic right now, but I will quote a Sand County Almanac as it is relevant to this particular presentation. Aldo Leopold wrote that one of the penalties of an ecological education is that one lives alone in a world of wounds. Much of the damage inflicted on land is quite invisible to laymen. An ecologist must either harden their shell and make believe that the consequences of science are none of his business, or he must be the doctor who sees the marks of death in a community that believes itself well and does not want to be told otherwise. I think you guys do want to know, and so we will talk about that now. So Aldo Leopold was basically saying that a lot of this unhealthiness is invisible to most people. So one of my goals here is to make this visible to you. So what do healthy and unhealthy ecosystems and habitats, neighborhoods, and landscapes look like? Here I'm presenting you two maps. One is from the pre-settlement time, about 1831. In Chicago and the surrounding region. This map is made from handwritten notes by land surveyors, of which Benjamin Franklin sent an army across the country, basically, to survey the land for selling it. Of course, this land was already settled by indigenous peoples. And so we won't dig into that tonight, but what I want to show you here is that we have this brown shade on this map is what was designated as prairie by the settlers, and then green was the woodlands. And so woodlands in our region are really only around water originally. Nowadays, there's a lot more woodland than there used to be on the landscape, and we'll talk a little bit about why. But the other colors in here, you don't need to think about right now because they're just different mixes of woodlands and prairies. And then on the right, we have the eye view map, which is the Illinois natural areas map. And here, what I want you to see is that it is highly fragmented and that we have some left. So with this, we're now setting our stage, the past, where we've come from, where our landscape has come from, and what it used to look like. And then we have now, and in the white on this map from the eye view, you know what's in there. It's corn and soybeans and suburbs. This is what is in the brown of that picture here. This is prairie. This is at Wolf Road Prairie. These are purple blazing stars, which we casually called prairie torches. And then the grasses and flowers mixed in form this biodiverse ecosystem that evolved in North America over millions of years, and through the ice ages shifted its range around quite a bit over the hundreds of millennia. This is a savanna. This is in Northbrook. This is at Somme Prairie Grove. This is a beautiful, high quality savanna. It is one of the only left of its kind in the state, and it is biodiverse and healthy. So we have healthy and healthy. This is a photo from Winnetka in the 1880s. So this isn't too long after European settlement in our region. And what you can see here is the impact of grazing. Grazing animals were very common in our region. The Forest Preserve District, which formed in 1918, had a specialist like me for each goats, horses, and cows. Grazing was a huge deal in our region, and it did impact biodiversity quite a bit. You see there are no small trees and very few flowers. Looks like just that one kind of white one down there. So here we're going to have our first look at an invasion. This is early spring at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and this is an area that still has buckthorn in it, European buckthorn, which we'll talk about more. But the thing to see here is that buckthorn outcompetes other plants, native plants, by leafing out earlier. It's from a different continent with different conditions. Its summers start earlier where it's from, which is Northern and Central Europe. This is Middle Fork Savanna in Lake Forest. This is a nature preserve that has very high quality pieces left, but where it was farmed in the open is now a solid monoculture, which we will talk about, of goldenrod, which is a native plant, but is what we call a native invasive. And we will talk about that as we go forward here. But I want to show you these pictures of unhealthy ecosystems. This is what has happened as a result of bringing non-native invasive species to North America and then also altering landscape function in North America. This is the result of that. So remember, this was the high quality. Look at that. It's biodiverse. It has different colors and textures, shapes. You can tell there's a lot of plant diversity in there. This too, these are our woodlands in mid-spring, maybe the beginning of May, maybe the middle of May. You can see here that nature abhors a vacuum. There is just cover of plants everywhere. These are rich ecosystems in Illinois that we are the receivers of. And so tonight, what we'll talk about during my presentation is monocultures, because that's a very important concept. And some of these other questions that I'm not going to read out loud, but we'll address throughout the night. And so what is a monoculture? Well, it's pretty simple. It just is a growth of one thing, or the antithesis of biodiversity. This is probably the most common monoculture you see around in Illinois, and this has serious consequences. So we'll talk about those. This is another kind of monoculture you might see in Illinois. That rich woodland I just showed you a photo of oftentimes looks like this in reality, because our woodlands have been neglected and they mostly have been invaded by different invasive species. Another common one is European buckthorn, which leaves nothing growing underneath it, and it actually can kill itself off. Tall goldenrod we spoke about. This is a native plant that has invasive qualities. And so let's talk about that for a second. Invasives are plants that do not play well with others. They are not either from the ecosystem and therefore have either an upper hand or some other way of getting ahead. And also there are native species that once the ecosystem function has been shifted so much, as this went from prairie to monoculture corn, and then after the Forest Preserve in Lake County bought it, it just turned into goldenrod. And so this is not healthy. Native invasive does not play well with other natives. Exotic or non-native invasives also do not play well with others. Here is that healthy picture again. And I'm really going to push this healthy visual versus the non-healthy visual, because you see more of this on the landscape than you do this. And it's important to understand what you're seeing. That's what Aldo Leopold was trying to say. He's trying to say that you think that this is healthy, but this is not healthy. This is healthy. This is biodiverse. And so what is the result of these monocultures? Buckthorn, corn, goldenrod. Well, we lose wildlife habitat, just like you losing your house or your road or your school. And so these animals that we live with, which I will tell you a little bit about the impacts of those in coming slides here, are severely impacted by these monocultures. And there's the destruction of soil, air, and water, which are 4 of the elements that we rely on, or 3 of the 4 elements that we rely on. And so what I want to talk to you about with those corn monocultures is this. In 2019, the New York Times published an article saying, it's already here. We've already done the damage. The insect apocalypse is the title of this, but truly it's a reality. And what does this mean for the rest of life on Earth? You can dig into this article if you feel like reading that. I suggest it. It is important to know exactly how this impacts everything. These monocultures are basically insect destroyers because we spray them with insecticides, because insecticides or insects are pests to a monoculture like this. Whereas to a native ecosystem or a functional ecosystem that is biodiverse, insects are typically seen as a resource. The other group of animals that I want to point out today to you that are impacted by invasive species and monocultures are birds. In the last 50 years, Audubon reported that we have lost 1/4 of the birds in North America. And here we'll dig into that a little bit just to drive this point home. Baltimore Orioles have seen a 28% decrease. Grassland birds, prairie birds, 53%. We plowed 99.99% of the prairie. So grassland birds cannot nest or live in cornfields and soybean fields. They need grasslands. These aerial insectivores, well, they've lost a lot of insect food. And so while a barn swallow used to be one of the most common birds in the world, we've lost 32% in 50 years. In total, 3 billion birds were lost in the last 50 years. And if you want to learn more about that, you can look on to Audubon. These are the invisible impacts that Aldo Leopold is talking about. You don't see this. The biologists who measure it intentionally go out to see it and find it. And therefore, we have this information. So losing ecosystems doesn't just impact wildlife. Losing ecosystems and creating new ones that are destructive to the soil, water, and air impacts the ecosystem services that humans derive from the environment. So don't forget that your neighborhood is an ecosystem, and there's nothing you can do about that. It's how you take care of it that you can impact it. And so this diagram just shows a little bit about the basic concept of ecosystem services. I thought about trying to explain to you how people quantify these, but I think it's more impactful to tell you that quantifying these in dollars doesn't make any sense. And everybody should learn about why that is true. And ecosystem services are one of those things that we take for granted. We get them for free. And we are just starting to learn what happens when you lose them. So what is an invasive species? Thank you for listening to that background. I think it sets the stage really well for this. So a non-native species that is invasive has come from a different part of the world and has different characteristics. It has different strengths and weaknesses. Not every species from different parts of the world has taken off as invasive in North America, but many have, and a few have been particularly menacing. And so occasionally there are aggressive native species that we qualify as invasive because of their impact. It is very similar to the non-native invasive species. And so here again, this is a key pair of photographs for everybody watching right now, because right now you can still see buckthorn leaves on the left here when you drive around the suburbs like Wilmette in your car. You can see these leaves because buckthorn from a different part of the world in England, where it is warmer still, and England and across Central Europe and Northern Europe, this plant still is photosynthesizing and growing. And over the course of 100 years since it was introduced here, this 4 extra weeks of activity has led to this plant dominating our entire region, which I will talk about also. So some invaders are native, like I said before, and they're not all tall goldenrod. Sugar maple can be invasive in the oak woodland. Sugar maple is native to the United States and North America, and it is the dominant tree type in the east of Ohio. Sugar maple woodlands are the dominant ecosystem type. But once you get west of Ohio, where the climate was drier, as you keep moving west, it gets drier and drier to the Rocky Mountains, and then you get the arid mountains. And so the sugar maple invasions, you might ask why? Well, it's because European settlers have changed the way that we interact with the landscape. This landscape was assembled under a Native American indigenous peoples regime of fire. They did this because they had a semi-nomadic lifestyle and they hunted and survived on bison, elk, deer, and other grassland species. It's important to tell you that these plants evolved over millions of years. Their fire adaptations are not due to the Native Americans. The Native Americans were here for about 10,000 years. And so the plants evolve over a longer period of time. That tells us that fire was actually a regular part of the ecosystem in Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, especially Florida, the Southeast. North America was a very, very flammable place, and it still is. I think we all agree. So one thing that I want to show you here is that those land survey notes. If we dig deeper into these data, what we can see is we can pull out those woodlands and we can label the maples red and the oaks green, which I've done here. And so what you can see here is that in 1833, the landscaper or the land surveyors hardly encountered maple. There were a couple strongholds of maple forests that were in fire protected areas, usually on the east side of waterways, where fire from the west did not cross the water. And so what I'm showing you here is that our region was an oaky region. This Midwest landscape was full of ancient large oaks and stands of oak with prairie dispersing them. You've heard of Grosse Pointe Road and Morton Grove and Long Grove. On the map in the 1880s and early 1900s and 1830s, when this land was originally settled by Europeans, that was what they called the woodlands, Grosse Pointe. You'd have to pull out a map and say, well, between the sea of prairie, where's the point of woodland that we can live with the shade? And so that's where those names come from, because this was mostly prairie in our region. And when we talk about maple invasions, we're talking about when we stopped fire, this map turned more red. That's what we have now. We have lots of woodlands that used to be rich with understory plants because of open conditions and sunlight. And now we have dark sugar maple invaded oak woodlands. Just to drive this home, no fire equals maple. And that is bad for oak woodlands because oaks are full sun species. And so is their understory richness. Their understory species are the same. They need light. And so here, this is a typical, two typical scenarios. If you have an uninvaded, healthy woodland, this is a part of the woods of the Botanic Garden where we've been studying how this survived. And this is another part of the Botanic Garden woodland that has a horrible invasion. This is gone now, actually. This has been restored back to somewhat health, but not this rich yet because restorations are fairly difficult and don't typically reproduce the richness of a remnant woodland. So here, this is recent data from 2 weeks ago. This is the 2010 to 2020 study by the Chicago Region Tree Initiative out of the Morton Arboretum. And they found that in 2020, we still have 36% of our canopy in the Chicago region is buckthorn. That's 36%. Oaks don't even make this chart. Just to drive that home. Oaks are at about 2%, little less. So they didn't make this. So back to the ecosystem services. Clearly, there's probably some impact here, right? So these plants, buckthorn, garlic mustard, multiflora rose, tall goldenrod, sugar maple, even though they're native, they reduce water quality. They can hinder and decrease biodiversity, especially the buckthorns. And fish and wildlife habitat, I mean, when we get to Canal Shores, maybe we can talk more about that. I'm the woodland guy. I don't know much about under the water. And then tree cover. We don't have oaks in our canopy as much anymore because buckthorn does not allow them to grow underneath them. Grandmother oak rains down acorns and they don't grow with buckthorn above them. So what can you do? I hope that that was enough information about invasive species. There are native ones, there are especially non-native ones, and they're invasive because they come from a different part of the world where their conditions are different. When they got to North America, they have a longer period of photosynthesizing every year. They have about 4 weeks on both ends of the growing season. So that's 8 weeks. That's enough to outcompete everything. So the number one thing you can do is replace the buckthorn that's near you. The buckthorn that's in your yard or in your neighbor's yard that you talk to your neighbor about, the Morton Arboretum has put together a guide for you here. It's called the Healthy Hedges Guide. You can find it on the internet and it's been updated this year. So it has a lot more species than it used to. It used to just be one page. You can plant native plants at your garden. You can make your yard a little chunk of ecosystem. And by doing that, you can decrease the fragmentation that humans have caused on the landscape. That first map I showed you with all those spots in the current time period versus the pre-settlement time period, that's the fragmentation I'm talking about. That means that there are not ways for chipmunks to get to the other woods. Although birds can fly, they oftentimes, once fly to a new place, don't find any habitat there because it's just buckthorn. And so by reconnecting areas and growing native plants in your yard, they are attractive and they are also important to the ecosystem. Although some people think they might be weedy, we can talk about that. They do have a nature that is different than a domesticated plant. So hedgerows, I just wanted to put this quote in there because I think it's brilliant. We live in one of the most diverse shrub areas of the world, and we have European buckthorn everywhere. It's something that we can solve. On the right, that might look like your backyard. That's my cousin's backyard. And so this on the left is a hedgerow that would create the same privacy screening and, in my opinion, be much more beautiful and provide the ecosystem services to native habitat, wildlife, and soil, air, and water that I talked about before. So here's just if you needed a few more reasons, they are attractive native plants. They're pollinator friendly. We're in the insect apocalypse, remember. They're wildlife friendly. They promote soil health because they don't push any chemicals into the soil like invasives do. Invasives that are from different parts of the world carry with them different chemistry, different root chemistry, and that can adversely affect the soils and therefore the germination and establishment of native plants. The most important thing here, I think, at least for people who are just trying to get started, is trying to find that problem area in your yard, that area you don't have an answer for. There's an answer for it at the native plant sale. So here is a savanna. This is also in Northbrook at the same site, Soame Prairie Grove on Dundee Road. And this is an ecosystem that has similar light levels to our suburbs. So you might be able to plant those plants in your yard, and it might look like this. It might break up your lawn a little bit. You can still have a lawn, but you're providing so much information or so much for the native habitat and wildlife. So just to push this a little further, one of the most important things you can do to combat invasive species is to plant natives because they support all of the native biodiversity. They are popular these days because everybody is starting to understand what Aldo Leopold was saying. They're starting to understand that, oh, I'm surrounded by unhealthy landscapes, and now I know it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I live in the prairie state. I'm going to put some prairie plants in my yard. I'm not going to eliminate my lawn, but I'm going to start caring for the environment more at home. And so what else can you do besides planting native species in your yard? Well, you can volunteer in the preserves. Happy to help connect people with folks who are doing this. It's gaining popularity, and this has always been something that dedicated people are willing to teach others. Most people just don't know how much fun and how satisfying and rewarding this work can be. And so here we have some young people protecting native plants from deer, which we won't talk about tonight, but just for your information, there are 100 deer per square mile in Cook County. And then this is people collecting seeds out in the prairie for sowing in areas where people have cut the invasives out of the prairies. And then finally, you can importantly support projects like the Canal Shores project. This is the way that we need to move as a society. We need to start implementing designs, collaborative designs between ecologists and native plant expert volunteers, people who just know the land, and the people who are managing the land, like Canal Shores, people who are in charge of the land. And so with that, I just want to leave you with 5 first steps that anyone can take in order to eliminate invasive species and also, importantly, promote native species. It's not good enough to eliminate natives. The seeds of the native species, or the non-natives, the seeds of the native species are not in the seed bank. They're not in the soil. The soil was exhausted by grazing and then the subcanopy closure from buckthorn. Everything tried to grow and it couldn't. And so seeds need to be moved around carefully with an understanding of how far you're moving them. You don't want to move a seed from Michigan to Illinois, and you don't want to move a seed from Texas to Illinois. Controlling exotic invasive species. This is obvious. We've talked about this tonight. You can avoid the insecticides and fertilizers. Most native plants are hardy and don't need them. They grew up in Illinois, evolutionarily speaking, and they understand what they're in for. Practicing benign neglect is a great way to promote native insects. Leave the leaves, at least in the corner of your yard. Don't take them all. There are insects in those leaves that are important for the Baltimore Orioles, the barn swallows, the meadowlarks, and what was the other one? I don't remember. Plant diverse native plants that you like. And so if you needed to know what those look like, here is the great blue lobelia and the cardinal lobelia mixed in with some black-eyed Susans and bone sets and Joe Pye weeds. This could be your yard. And this is a good way to combat invasive species. So with that, that's all I have for you guys tonight. I can't wait to answer some questions and have a discussion with everyone. Catherine, just let me know how you'd like to proceed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And do you think maybe it was the white-throated sparrow that you were thinking of? Because they kick around in my yard every spring.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I so much appreciate this background, and it's going to segue beautifully into our next presenter, who's Ed Nesbitt, and he's going to talk to you about what's going on at Canal Shores, which is an optimal example of what we're talking about, the kinds of things that we need to be doing all around our landscape. So Ed, go right ahead.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm getting my slides here for you. Can everyone see this? So Canal Shores is located just south of Wilmette. It actually straddles Wilmette and Evanston along the North Shore Channel. We've been around for a little over 100 years now. The course was, kind of a result of the dredging of the channel, and that dredging or that soil helped create Gilson Park. Many of you know the history on that. We run south of Sheridan Road along the canal, about 82 acres in total. Only about 45 are dedicated to golf. The other part of the other remaining acreage is really primarily the canal banks and some of the lands that have, or if you will, some of the banks that have crept up, invasive species that have crept up and taken away some of the footprint of the golf course. So early, mid 1920s or mid 2010s, however, the golf course has gotten into a kind of an ecology mode, spearheaded by several people. Many of you know Steve Newman. He was one of the early volunteers at Canal, and really started to take a comprehensive look at the ecology of the golf course and our surrounding lands. The challenge was really to not only to understand the native species, but also the invasive species. And similar to what Matt had said, so many of those invasive species have really taken over and blocked out the native understory, which left us with really a void carpet, if you will, because of the buckthorn and burdock, primarily the buckthorn, that really shielded out any of the sunlight. None of the native species could get sunlight at the ground level, and therefore we have unfortunately a very robust buckthorn population at the shores. We've done a very good job starting most recently in earnest in the fall or the spring of 2020, mostly due to the pandemic. My slide deck here tonight kind of takes you north or south to north. We're going to work north from Green Bay Road on our south end, which is right at the Union Pacific crossover here. And we move north. We have the course is divided into 5 sections. I'll briefly go through each section for you and give you highlight some of the areas of that area in each section. Matt, you had this slide in your slide deck, and it is a very good slide for us. It shows some of the wetlands that we have along the southern bank of the canal, just north or northeast of Green Bay Road. We have done considerable work on the banks on the holes 14 and 15 and 17 and 18, which run north-south between Lincoln and Green Bay Road. This work that we started on the south end on 14 and 15 was neighborhood driven through volunteers. We really wanted to continue to work that we did on the north end of the course. Several of the local families in the area wanted to remove that green wall. And Matt alluded to what we've gotten used to, which is what we call at Canal Shores, the green wall. It's really impenetrable. You can't see past it. You can't play over it. It's choke full of buckthorn and other invasives that really have choked out the native oaks and hickories and elms that were indigenous to our area. These are some of the prior shots before we started to work. When we went down on the canal bank, there was an immense amount of tangled dead timbers that had fallen, buckthorn that had grown up within it, choking grapevine, and we really started in earnest to take this out. At the same time, we decided to have some fun with this through an interest in a local Boy Scout troop who wanted to create some nature trails along the canal bank. It seemed to be a very good idea. We were removing buckthorn. We were cutting back dead timbers and really not wanting to over disturb the wildlife and the habitat. We limited any taking of trees to dangerous leaners, if you will, snags, dead snags that were leaned up against other trees, and buckthorn. So in our clearing, we were able to open up some trail work. The idea was to create a whole trail, the full loop, if you will, from Sheridan Road on the north end to Green Bay on the south end. And we're making very good progress, although it's slow. It is very good and very fun. These two slides are interesting, taken from the third hole. This is recently done work. This, you can see the L trellis that crosses the that crosses the canal just south of Central Street in Evanston. These are some further shots of the people in the neighborhood. We do control burns, Matt. This is something in coordinates, in orchestration with the Cook County Forest Preserve on best practice and how to get rid of our invasive species. We don't have a chipper, if you will. We don't have the means to physically haul these species away, this dead timbers and the buckthorn. So we do a controlled burn. Ideally, we do one of these in the winter between October to March, or even April and May, probably 1 or 2 a month, depending on the holes and how aggressive we are in the clearing of the invasives. Part of the work we've done, we have a responsibility in that open area that we've cleared on those banks. We have in partnership with our landlord, which is the MWRD, Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. Through their efforts and our partnership with them, they've donated and started a donation program, if you will, of understory and high value trees. They gave us over 150 whips in the middle of early in 2021, excuse me. And what we did, we needed to plant these whips somewhere on the golf course. So we've created 2 nurseries, if you will, one on the north and south end of the course. This one that you're looking at is on the 4th hole at Colfax and Jackson in Evanston. So we have really built up this area and in completing it with really desirable trees that we are, sorry, I'm going the wrong way there. Desirable trees that we want to put in on the premises of the golf course and the banks of the canal to further enhance the native habitat for pollinators, birds, and the like. Moving north from Central Street, moving north of Lincoln to Central Street is, I don't want to call it a dead zone, but it's an area we really haven't touched yet. It is like all the other banks, it's chock full of buckthorn, hickory, and other invasives. There's a lot of burdock in that area as well. Burdock is kind of a biannual, if you will, where it produces leaves the first year, and the second year it produces its shoot or its thistle, where it produces the seeds. Same thing with the garlic mustard. The first year on the garlic mustard is a leaf structure. The second year it shoots up its shoot, with giving us the seeds. So we've gone in earnest combating those two, the burdock and the garlic mustard. In these areas, due to the Central Bridge work that's going on right now on Central Street, we really haven't touched this segment of the golf course. When we move into Central Street to Isabella, this is part of the golf course that has seen probably the most improvement and the most work done on it. On the east side is hole 3, And on the west side is hole 11 and 12 and 11 going south to north. This area, these pictures here that you're showing are early photos in early 2020. The area circled is really where we attacked. The leg that you see here on this is kind of almost where we stop. We kind of drew an imaginary line from here to the green. This is Central Street right here. We stopped cutting this area primarily because we didn't want to overcut the buckthorn. Believe it or not, we want to leave some of the habitat. Birds have gotten used to it, although they don't nest in it. It is very much of a hedge, and in keeping with some of the massive amount of clearing we did on that hole, we wanted to leave some of the, and I'm hesitant to call this a native, but remember this has been here now, it's encroached in the last 50 years. So removing all that was a little bit, maybe too much for some of the native wildlife. So this area we did leave on the south end of the hole. This area we have moved very aggressively against it. And we planted native grasses and shrubbery in there to combat it. This is what that hole, this area right here, you're looking at it essentially from the south looking northeast on this shot. Here's Evanston Hospital by high in the distance. This is summer of 19. And then in the following April, here's what the work we started to do. This trellis, you really can't see the train trellis. We really open it up considerably. This is the area, the dense area of buckthorn that we left. This is the area that we opened up. You can see this dark area is all where really the overgrowth came to. And we've seen early slides provided by Historical Society of Evanston that showed when the golf course was created back in 1919, 1920, 21, our banks came up to the top and went horizontal over, was all golf course. So we lost anywhere from 8 to 40 feet of golf course playable surface due to invasive species, predominantly buckthorn. As I mentioned, holes 11 and 12 were really the first areas where this work really took off in earnest during the pandemic. And you can see from this slide, this whole area was completely choked out. This is what it was prior to. This is a really interesting shot, I think. This was the hole we really took it to in earnest. We've cleared it out, and now we've gone to planting it. This is that area, excuse me. This is the area of the aerial shot that you saw, and here's that bridge with a timely shot of a rainbow behind it. We were able to plant a native grass in that area to get some ground cover to build up the soils. Interesting that in only 2 short years since we cleaned that out, but it's been almost 2 years anyways, the overgrowth of, when we open the soils up, the overgrowth of garlic mustard and burdock that's sprang to life because of this. We took away the canopy and allowed light and air to get into the soil that these other somewhat invasives took over. Most prominently the garlic mustard and some of that goldenrod that you spoke of, Matt. When we moved north into hole 11, we continued to remove trees, a lot of them along the banks of the CTA tracks. And I can tell you, I don't have any updated pictures on this, but the CTA tracks are right here, if you will, running parallel to our 11th hole. There was no sun behind here. CTA came in here, and due to our work, they came in and cleared all the buckthorn that was up on the track level inside the gate or the fencing that we could not access. So it's really opened up a tremendous amount of sunlight, air, wind, and playability to our golf course. So not only are these invasives difficult to manage for growing plant growth underneath within the forest. They also do shut out quite a bit of light where we need it to maintain our lush grasses and plain surfaces, if you will. The 11th hole is really kind of, and I encourage many of you, whoever you have not visited, to visit it. It is really a work in progress. It's been ongoing since late 2020 when we moved from the 12th hole, which is just on the west side of the tunnel, or the west side of those L tracks, if you will. All current spaces were maintained. We recovered quite a significant amount of that hole and put it back into, we've recently reseeded it and put it back into plain conditions. We've also planted a number of desirable understory pollinators and butterfly-friendly milkweed plugs that we were able to receive from, I believe it was the Kansas State University, who actually donated to us for us to help restore our understory and pull in some pollinators and most specifically monarch butterfly habitat. We planted dozens of dogwood, red osier dogwood, black and red chokeberry, serviceberry, edelberry. We've really done what we feel is, as much as we took down the buckthorn and the burdock, we felt we really wanted to go in and restore the under canopy, or the under layer there, the understory shrubbery. So through donations of the local neighborhood, funds raised from the Canal Shores itself, from the generosity of MWRD, our landlord, we've created 2 nurseries on the north and south end, as I've said, and many of the whips that they provided were too young to go on the golf course, so they went into our nursery. And it's really, it's been a wonderful way to bring the neighborhood and the communities together. We've all learned a tremendous amount, and most importantly, our golf course and our habitat that we have around our lands has been vastly improved. The photo on your left here is a reclaimed land for the golf course. It stretches about 80 yards. It's 20 feet to 30 feet to 8 feet, and it was all chock full of buckthorn. It was all, had very little on the bottom. It was full of buckthorn. It took us months to clear, but it's been very rewarding. And now we just seeded, this is about 2 weeks old, this grass that's come up. On the other side of the hole, on the west side, we've cleared some areas. Those stumps that you see were created with the idea to engage neighborhoods and young children. They come in and skip those cuttings. Those are old, large trees that were either felled, or we took them down because they were dead. We, cut them into 6-inch rounds and created a little skipping area. And it's been a lot of fun for the kids in the neighborhood. And when we have work days, it's a great place for the younger folks to enjoy themselves while the other people are engaged in taking care of the invasive species. This is a look at our 11th hole nursery. We've installed a rain barrel. Some of the local volunteers have used our rain barrels to hand water that milkweed that I showed you, that I explained earlier. Is very difficult to get water on our course, so we did our best job to install local watering for some of the people. And really, I'd say of the 175 plants, we lost about 30 of them that we can tell. So they've died off certainly now, and they'll come back to great pollinators. And we're really working hard to create a new habitat based on this understory growth that was donated to us by the MWRD and local donations from area stakeholders. Part of our, this really isn't on the invasives, but many of this some of this lumber that you see is invasive, whether it's honeysuckle or burdock. We've got a splitter and we're splitting wood, and we have firewood to offer for those who care to come collect and make a donation on behalf of Canal Shores. This area is now part of that area that you see seated right here. This was for I'd say a good year and a half, but this is a very aggressive work area for all sorts of cutting, splitting, stacking, and really served as part of our burn location for a great number of months. Hole 11 is a masterpiece that will be showcased for years to come once we are completely through with the work. Part of some of the things that were unearthed was this beautiful great horned owl that came to roost. She or he had a mate. They had some pups, I believe they're called. There were 2 of them. And all spring long, we had a great horned owl watching on hole 11. Partially, we feel, and we don't know, this is kind of a layman's approach, but since we did so much of that bank clearing, we feel that perhaps there was quite a bit. He was essentially looking down at this area. Perhaps we gave him some greater hunting grounds with some open terrain. We don't know, but that's our guess, and it's like it makes good sense to those of us who took the pictures and did the work out there. Here's a mink that we noticed at the canal's edge. All of these pictures are within the last year. We really have not seen this kind of wildlife that we've seen return to the area. It's really quite encouraging. Moving farther north, this is a section that is one of the most significant areas of Canal Shores, and in that it holds some very old growth, 200 plus old oaks. It's called Isabella Woods, if you will. It's right here that runs, these are the L tracks. This is Isabella running north here to my right. This area is what we call Isabella Woods. Here's our 10th hole. And then on the other side here, this is part of our 9th hole, if you will. This is an aerial shot of Isabella Woods. These are all some of that old growth oaks that we spoke of. When you get down at eye level, you'll see there's really no buckthorn in this area. It's quite nice. There is some on the north end of it, and certainly some over here on the south, but in this area, it's still a very mature and old growth stand of oak. We don't have a whole lot of restoration going on in this area. If anything, we really are just removing any invasives that we see. We want to keep it as is. It's a wetland. It's really, when you get into this area and see these majestic trees, you will ever wonder why anyone would want to put a house in there or do anything but maintain it the way it is. This little small box is the 10th hole in the middle of 2019, excuse me, looking south along the hole. The aerial that you're looking at here on the right is late fall of 2020. And again, you're looking at this small green over here. So that's the view you're looking at for those of you who want to have an idea where you're viewing. This is hole 9, if you will. Isabella Woods would be in the top half over here, facing west, if you will. This is an aerial view of our 9th tee box, our storied Canal Shores snack shack, if you will, of Murray Brothers lore. For those that any of you know the story, Bill Murray worked there as a child selling candy and used golf balls. These are the banks of our 9th hole where we've done some restoration, but mostly it's just keeping the tall plants from growing up to impede the sightline to the tee to green. This area does contain our 5th hole rain garden. It's this area right here. Nancy is going to speak more about that after my presentation, so I'll leave that to her, but this is a good visual and gives you an idea of where you are relative in my slide deck as I move south to north. This is Maple Avenue in Wilmette. As we move farther north, north of Linden Avenue, which has hole 5 on the north side. On the west east side of the river, we have hole 8. We haven't done a whole lot of work in that area. This area has not received a ton of work as of yet, due to really, it takes a long time for us to move north, if you will, going along the banks of the river and cutting buckthorn. We also are somewhat impeded by the ability to burn, have a controlled burn on Wilmette in Wilmette territory. Currently, what we do pull off of Wilmette land and that needs to be burned, we pull it over to that 11th hole and burn at that site, which is fully within Evanston. This is an area, and all this lumber, by the way, was burned. It was all dragged south of Isabella and burned on the 11th hole. So the idea, eventually we'll be able to get a burn permit in Wilmette where we can continue our restoration efforts along the canal banks for moving buckthorn and the like. And we'll be able to burn it on site. If not, we'll still burn it to the south because it does need to go. We do want to continue with our efforts. They've really engaged, the efforts themselves have engaged the neighborhood. It's garnered the attention of Open House Chicago. It's garnered the golf writers. There's all sorts of wonderful things that have come out of the restoration of Canal Shores. Most impressively, I think, is the community coming together. The number of people that have come out to volunteer their efforts to help remove buckthorn and clear away burdock and hand pull thistle and some of the other invasive plants has really been heartwarming. Our volunteer ranks, due to this work, what Matt kind of started, we're getting people together and educating myself. I didn't know anything about this before. We're all coming together for a great common good, and it's to remove our lands of invasive species, restore the understory, bring back the pollinators, bring back the bees and the butterflies, and really get a much more healthy ecosystem, if you will. So this area that you're looking at currently is still bare. These trees are here. We left the live trees. We do leave snags on the course. As long as they're straight up, they are very good habitat for ants and other bird food, if you will, or other wildlife that takes nest in it. This area, while it has come back in terms of the growth, it still gives us a good vista of Sheridan Road and the Baha'i Temple, something we have not had before. This area is right at our front doorstep to Sheridan Road, if you will. This is directly across from Gilson Park. You can see what happens when thistle is let go. You could barely see our sign. Through volunteer groups, we were able to clear all that thistle, and we recently just planted this area again. So that it really is a work in progress. Most importantly, once you do the work to clear it, you've created a responsibility to the land. And as Matt knows, once you pull out this burdock, if you don't treat it and take care of it, it will come back. You will have understory, you will have invasive understory like thistle and burdock, which is, as I say, a broadleaf biannual plant that really spreads. Once the seeds, they similar to a dandelion, the seeds go to a flower and they blow all over and continue to spread. So we've done our best we can with the resources we have, hand pulling, weed whacking and burning, or putting it in a plastic bag and keeping it away from the wind and the daylight so the seeds die. This is all part of the restoration process. It's not easy. It's time consuming, very labor intensive, back-breaking work. But through almost hundreds of volunteers now, the Canal Shores is mustered. We're making a good dent at it. And it's really been quite rewarding to all of us who are engaged in the process. I did mention birding on our golf course earlier. It may have been brought up. We have over 800, I think it's 185 is the number. And I've done my best to list them all here. I don't expect you to appreciate all of these, but just to come out to Canal Shores and see the number and the diversity of wildlife here is really encouraging. And I encourage anyone who has not walked our course, to give it a look, to look at our nature paths, to walk the loop we've already created from Lincoln to the footbridge on 15, all the way back north along the south side of the canal along 17 and 18. Perhaps you'll see some of these, and you will definitely see some cranes, some herons, and a number of birds. The fall is a wonderful time for the, excuse me, for the migratory birds that are coming through. It's quite an impressive list. There's a gentleman, Matt Rooney, who sits on our board. He does run a bird walking tours in the fall, spring and fall. I encourage anyone who has an interest in that to come out and enjoy the course and then take in our nature on that one. Furthermore, I can't put the slide deck together on Canal Shores and talk about removing buckthorn and burdock without mentioning some very key players. You know, the pandemic had its silver lining for Canal Shores. There are a lot of us locals didn't have commutes to do, so we were looking for things to do. Two guys in particular, Scott Nelson and Pat Hughes, really bumped out the efforts on hole 12, which I showed you back in April of 2020. That really manifested and worked its way around our golf course. At the start of this, I started on 14 and 15. Those neighbors were encouraged by the work of Scott and Pat. I was encouraged by the work of Scott and Pat, and my volunteerism really took off because of these guys. I have a great interest in golf. That's really what brought me here. But the ecology mission, once I learned about it, we really have a treasure here that many of us, dozens of us, really work tirelessly to maintain and to keep a very create or improve the ecosystem through removal of invasives, the planting of native species to bring back the birds and the bees and the other pollinators, to maintain our beautiful savannas and our wetlands and our old growth oak trees. We plan to introduce maybe beekeeping on one or two of the holes, specifically 11 along the L train lines. It's out of the way and won't be really near any walkers or dog walkers. The idea is, with all this understory we're putting in, why not bring the bees back and help them out too? So without really, I don't have anything else, but the help that these guys all started, I can't say enough about the work of Pat and Scott and the gentleman in the lower left, Jason Way, who's another one of the early pioneers of starting this progress of Canal Shores. Many of us are in great in debt to him for his starting off this process. And that's really, that ends my slide deck for you. I'm open to any questions about the golf course or any of the ongoing projects we have, our nurseries, our paths, our tree removal, and really welcome any visitors and or volunteers to our group. Our ranks, we're always welcome and welcome to meet new people and welcome you to our group. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to take them, or we can wait till after Nancy's presentation. Nancy's going to speak to our a beautiful area we have up on 5, which is this area here that I mentioned. Nancy, you want to pick up from here?
That'd be great, and I'll be really quick since you guys have been sitting and listening for a long time. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I'll just grab these, just give a moment. And the 5th hole garden that Ed had mentioned a few times, that is at the corner of Driftwood and Maple in Wilmette. And it's a little different project. It's a little different story with Canal Shores, because this is not just the volunteer effort that Ed was talking about, but with so many generous donations from neighbors and a $10,000 Union Pacific grant, we were able to hire Pizzo and Associates to go ahead and help restore this area. When they originally started, there was nothing worth saving, so they pretty much erased the whole thing, and we started with a clean slate. Some of the most noxious invasives that we were getting rid of are the burdock, the curly dock, thistle, and the mustard, the garlic mustard that you've all heard so much about tonight. They also took care of what Matt was calling the native invasives, such as the tall goldenrod and the pokeweed. Some of the plants that we replaced those noxious invasives with were the coneflower, Ohio spiderwort, the black-eyed Susan, the butterfly weed, cardinal flower, blazing star, and swamp milkweed, which did bring back the monarchs. And it's really fun in the autumn. You can see all of the yellow goldfinches coming through to get the seeds from the coneflowers. This is what the garden was looking like later this summer. And it's been a really great effort. We have had Pizzo back to do a lot of the stewardship work. But what's different is that we are working with them on the stewardship, so we can go ahead and take over that, as well as move on to other areas and know how to take care of the areas that are cleared, so we can keep them free of the invasives and go ahead and really propagate those natives. And I would really like to invite anyone who'd like to see this garden. It's not looking great right now, being fall, but certainly in the spring, come by. It's, like I said, on the corner of Maple and Driftwood in Wilmette. And it's a really beautiful place to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Both of you, it's truly an inspiring volunteer effort. And I'm so impressed at how many groups and different entities have been involved with this. So my cat is sitting on my notes, but I'm going to turn it over to Beth, who will moderate a Q&A, and we will get some questions for you to answer. And certainly, Ed and Nancy, make sure that you let people know where to look for what's going on in terms of volunteer efforts with Canal Shores. Beth, are you prepared to?
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna start the video. Okay, great. Thank you. We've got Q&A. We do have a hard stop at 8:30, and we've got some really great experts here to help us. I'd like to ask really quickly about Canal Shores. If someone did want to get involved at Canal Shores, how would they do that, Ed?
So they would do that, Catherine, by going to our website. And I'm sorry to say this on this. Our website is canalshores.org. There is an ecology tab, and you can donate your time, fill out a volunteer waiver, and sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can email us at info@canalshores.org, and we'll put you on a list to receive our monthly newsletter. We have Canal Shores cleanup days or work days on the second Saturday of every month.
Okay, great. There's a couple of really bad invasives that you guys didn't bring up. So I wanted to ask about, first of all, lesser celandine. Is that something that you are struggling with? It's a low-lying ground cover that flowers in the spring. It's very beautiful. And as we've been admiring it, it has taken over acres and acres on the North Shore. Matt or Ed, any work with lesser celandine?
Matt, I'll leave that one to you.
Sure. Lesser celandine is a horrible invasive species. It kills everything, and it is very competitive. Lesser celandine typically you find that in wet areas, wet soils, not standing water, but wetter soils. It was brought here as a ground cover. It was bred to spread prolifically. So with lesser celandine, it's true, like the rest of them, we did that to ourselves. And unfortunately, lesser celandine is one of the species that you have to treat with safe and professionally with herbicides. So you cannot dig lesser celandine out of the ground because it, like an onion, has one bulb each lesser celandine plant has dozens. So you dig it out and it comes back forever. So lesser celandine is a horrible invasive that you have to use some kind of chemical control on. Some people have had luck with the vinegar salt water thing. More people have luck with some other products. We at the Botanic Garden carefully use a herbicide called Aquaneat to take care of that plant. We're very targeted, and as fast as we can replace that area with something like Coneflower or another wet woodland species. Lesser celandine is taking over the North Shore and other places, and we do have to understand that it won't go away without taking care of it. And the way to take care of it is with herbicide.
Right. Okay. One thing I noticed, there's a great app on that you can get on your phone. It's called Picture This, which is really, really helpful if you're unsure of what you're looking at in your yard. It's quite accurate, and you can just point and shoot and it will tell you what plant it is. Another plant that we're seeing all over in the forest reserves, and maybe Matt, you can talk about this, and especially on exit and entrance ramps of our highways all over, is a plant called teasel. Matt, are you?
Yeah, of course. Teasel was originally brought to North America for a very specific reason. Teasel in the Confederacy was used mostly for agricultural workers, slaves, to pull apart cotton. Instead of inventing a tool to do that and paying for that tool, people brought over teasel, which is a very spiky seed head that is an effective tool for that use. Teasel is a biennial that has a rosette of leaves that are no taller than a flat hand on the ground. And then in the second year, bolts, like Ed was talking about, and has a flowering head that is capable of producing thousands of seeds. Teasel later was then repurposed by the United States Department of Transportation to hold in those exit ramps, and they didn't know what they were doing. This is one of those things about plants that we are still learning to understand. In the 1970s, teasel was brought all over the country intentionally to hold in the soils on newly made ramps and highway edges.
Oh, I had no idea that was intentionally planted. Now that your quote, I love the quote, Matt. Now that you've learned about teasel, you will see it everywhere. Yeah, and instead of going, oh, that's a pretty plant, you'll know that it's a problem. Jeff Leiter wanted to know, how does buckthorn spread so aggressively?
Yeah, one of the traits of invasive species is their fecundity. They spread prolifically. Buckthorn, each berry typically has 20 to 30 seeds in it. And buckthorn's name is Rhamnus cathartica. Cathartica, because it is a cathartic, has a cathartic impact on birds, humans, anything that eats it. And so its dispersal mechanism is typically through birds. That's correct. I saw that in the questions. Yeah, so buckthorn is spreading via the birds, but it does make birds unhealthy. So it's kind of a twisted concept, but.
Okay, so Jan Carter Seymour is doing some buckthorn work in the Crystal Lake area. They just started Go Green Crystal Lake with this as their focus. And if you're trying to get rid of buckthorn, she's worried about can you use a chipper to try to get rid of the huge amounts of buckthorn, or would you end up just spreading their seeds? How do you think it should be best dealt with?
That's correct. She's correct in that. If you chip buckthorn, you can chip the males. Buckthorn is a tree that has both male and female plants, whereas a lot of plants are hermaphroditic. They are both male and female. And therefore, buckthorn has plants that you could chip and plants that you really shouldn't chip. So if it has berries on it or flowers on it in the spring and you're taking care of it in the spring, then you'll want to burn it. Burning it is the #1 best way to get rid of it. And if anybody has, while we're talking about this, if anybody has an idea for a buckthorn economy, please contact me, because we have so much, and market solutions are the way the world works on this continent. So.
Okay. So if anyone's biked up to the Botanic Gardens or walked the paths on the Botanic Gardens, it's a beautiful green tunnel. It's all buckthorn. It's just a massive, massive problem. Okay, moving off to goldenrod, the tall, showy goldenrod that you showed in some of your slides. Bees love it, and they can be covered with bees in the fall. So that makes people feel a little bad. Do we get rid of it because it gets aggressive, or leave it because clearly bees are using it?
It depends on your goals. So tall goldenrod in natural area reestablishment of health or restoration, we try to get rid of it. We don't use herbicides on goldenrod because that would be herbiciding acres and acres, and that is not something that anyone thinks is a good idea. So except some of the farmers. And so, not against the farmers. I know that they have an economic need, but we can change that whole system around to make it all work a lot better anyway. But the tall goldenrod can be left in patches in your yard. That's fine. The bees do love it. The thing that tall goldenrod will do is spread and eliminate spring and summer flowers, because it is an autumn flower, a late summer autumn flower. You will wind up with only pollinator habitat for the late summer and autumn, which is not desirable for pollinator gardens. So you can leave a little bit, but make sure that you're controlling it via scything, cutting, or I really hesitate to ever tell someone to dig something out. The soil has seen enough pain. Let it be, dig it out, or don't dig it out. You typically activate a seed when you do that. Yeah, so most of our soils have been completely manipulated over the last 150 years of settlement here. And so that's why you have your, you might think of in your suburb, in your backyard, your clay soils. You have just hard clay that doesn't drain water and is impossible to dig in and gets really muddy. That's because we've lost our topsoil layer due to the cultivation of houses, suburbs, businesses, roads. The suburbs are clay soily. And so when you dig into that soil, you tend to bring to the surface seeds of plants that came with Europeans over the last 150 years. And so you generally get a really weedy, sort of full of annual plants that just keep reseeding themselves. It never recovers unless you really leave it alone. And so one thing that I'd like to convey to people here about some invasives is this particular kind. When you dig and you get a flush of weeds, don't do anything to it. They go away. It does take 2 years, but if you continue to dig, you perpetuate the cycle. You just keep giving them the conditions under which they want to germinate and establish. They're disturbance-based weeds.
So would you cut them off at the ground?
The soil you cut level? Them when they go to seed. Yeah. So you can mow them with your lawnmower. You can try to get the seeds if you can, but yeah, that's the best thing to do. I typically advise people never to dig if they're trying to do something good for plants.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. There seemed to be a new invasive in the forest preserves this year. It was yellow, about 18 inches high, and it suddenly was everywhere.
Butterweed.
Tell us about butterweed, please.
Butterweed is a small mustard. Well, it's actually a bigger one, but it's yellow, and it takes over large areas of wet soils in the forest preserves. You'll probably end up finding it in your yard soon. Butterweed is invasive. Butterweed is also native to Southern Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma. It just is moving north with climate change. And that brings me to another question that I saw in the chat, which is how can you, or what should we expect from tree, seed, and animal migration under climate change? And what's happening is the northern climes are becoming more like the equatorial climes. Not quickly, we're not going to be equatorial Chicago anytime soon, but it is getting warmer. Specifically in the northern parts of the planet, it is becoming warmer sooner and longer and droughtier. And so these southern plants, it's a very simple concept. If you're adapted to warmer climates like Arkansas maybe, or Missouri, you might make your way to Illinois in 2021. And that's exactly what happened with butterweed.
Okay, so, for people who find garlic mustard in their yards, What should they do about garlic mustard?
There are two things. You can pull it, which is what I recommend, or almost every study that has studied garlic mustard for over 20 years documents it goes away. It has a negative soil feedback cycle on itself. It creates the conditions for itself to thrive by introducing microbes that assist it in establishment. And then it turns out that those microbes are perfect food for native microbes. So the native microbes then eat the microbes that are assisting the garlic mustard over time. We're talking about microbes, so long time here for populations of that to really boost up. And then garlic mustard is no longer competitive. Have you ever seen a garlic mustard that's this big? Yeah, that's further into the cycle. All of a sudden it can't compete anymore because it doesn't have its soil symbiont.
Wow, well, that's the best news I've heard about garlic mustard in a long time. Okay, question for Ed. You had said that you had left some non-native species for habitat. So we know there's a lot of trees like box elders, and maybe you and both Matt can mention this. If birds seem to be using them, are we supposed to leave some of them, or would they be better taken out? Let's Ed start, because someone asked you specifically, Ed, because you talked about leaving a shrub of buckthorn.
We've left some stands of buckthorn on holes that we've already been aggressive on. Mm-hmm. We did not want to take too much of a footprint off of that particular hole. And whether it was a stand of buckthorn, which is mostly what all the banks consist of, with with the occasional native tree, we have left them in certain areas to maintain that green wall, if you will, Catherine. And we did that really just because it was neighbors don't like to lose their green wall, quite frankly. Excuse me, Beth. So that's part of the reason why some of that green wall, especially on 12 off of Central Street, to the first 100 yards of north of Central, we left the buckthorn there. It is there only because we've already taken so much of the other parts of that hole. We really wanted to be somewhat responsible stewards, at least to the neighbors who complained about it. And it is, we're told, good for the bird habitat still. We did remove an incredible amount of foliage from that hole. So it did make sense to leave that part of the hole untouched.
Okay, it's 8:25. Catherine or Nancy, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask our speakers? There are others we haven't gotten to.
Yeah, I have one, and I don't know if it has any legs at all, but in the matter of herbicides, I am a science writer, and I have followed the development of biologics for human health. And we know a lot of very specific information about how proteins or small molecules can interrupt very specific aspects of human health, and we can manipulate that for human health. And I'm wondering if there's any effort or research going on to try to develop more specific and maybe less damaging herbicides that could help us with this kind of work.
Yeah, so the Forest Preserves of Cook County actually just switched one of its products from a product that has been deemed more toxic than the one that is now being used. They've switched from Garland 3A to Vassland 3A. That is an effort that I really applaud. I think that one of the other things that we're going to have to figure out in the 21st century is how to control these plants without toxic herbicides. For now, the research is ongoing. I think you might know more about that. But economically speaking, we don't have a better way to do it right now. And so that's why the use is continued at the moment. But I'm a big supporter of alternatives because, yeah, I know a lot of worriers out there, and I include myself in that.
That's a great segue to the point that the Forest Preserve District of Cook County is going to have a referendum in 2022 to actually raise taxes to provide more funding for the maintenance of the forest reserves in Cook County. They are the green necklace of Chicago. Really important, as you heard from Ed and Matt, it is very difficult to manage these large forests with the constant onslaught of the invasive plants. So we've been asked to spread the word. They are trying to build a consensus and support for that referendum that will be in November of 2022. Catherine, it's 8:28, so I'm going to turn it back over to you. If you could tell them about our Saturday event and wrap up and thank our speakers, and we'll be finishing up in a couple minutes.
Great. Well, I do want to thank all three of you. This has been most instructive and inspirational, and also, it gives us a lot of work to do. Yes, and I did want to mention, so Go Green Wilmette does many things, including habitat work. And one of the things we try to do is encourage people to compost. And this Saturday we have in Wilmette 2 dumpsters for your pumpkins. So one is at Village Hall and one will be at Centennial, and they will be open from 9 to 3, I believe. And so bring by your jack-o'-lanterns, anything that doesn't have decorations on it, no sparkly stuff, but paint is okay, and pitch them in and they will be composted instead of going to the landfill.
For a lot of people watching this webinar, you probably are the types that might just chop it into pieces and throw it under a shrub in your backyard. And that is also a very nice way to compost your pumpkin. If not, pitch it into the dumpster that we have. And many other communities are having their own pumpkin pitches, and we are saving tons and tons and tons of waste from going to landfills. I'm sorry that we haven't gotten to all the questions. I apologize, but it is 8:30 and we do have a hard stop for the webinar. So we're going to stop the recording, and we'll hang around for a couple of minutes, but with this, we're going to stop the recording and